Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at my tier list for every role. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check us out on Twitch starting around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community every night, so come by, check it out. Be sure to drop a follow there if you're interested, and you can also follow me on Twitter at the Strat Prof, the Strategy Professor on Twitter, if you want some additional announcements, notifications, I should say, just in case YouTube or Twitter don't give you those notifications. I just let you know whenever I release content or whenever I start streaming, if you're interested in that. I don't post anything political. I don't post pictures of food or anything like that on Twitter. It's strictly just used as an extra form of notifications if you want that. So be sure to follow on there too if you want. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So not a ton has changed in most roles. There are a couple of spicy builds that we'll talk about in some roles, but the meta didn't shake up too much, with the exception of maybe the ADC getting significantly weaker in a couple of the top spots, but we'll get to that as we go down. Okay, so in the top role, I still think that Camille is going to be the best overall. Now, her win rate is not as high as some of these other picks. She's about 50 or 51%. But she's also really hard to play for a lot of people. Just because if you do fall behind early, she is a carry champion. She doesn't bring a ton of CC or utility. So if you don't have the items, if you don't have the mechanics and sort of the decision making to make her happen, she doesn't have a lot of guaranteed power built into her kit. Sort of like Malphite, right? Like if or I guess as opposed to someone like Malphite, right? If you have Malphite, you can always just sort of press R and be useful in a team fight, even if you're 0-5, down 50 CS. You can still find a way to do some things. With Camille, not so. You really do have to have the gold. But she's still incredibly strong. They did tap her a few patches ago. I think they, nerfed something about her hook shot. Like at the top end, it's 12 seconds instead of 10 seconds. It didn't really matter that much. It didn't affect her win rate. And the items that she gets are still going to be incredibly strong. I mean, Divine Sunder works particularly well with her because if you don't know this, the Spellblade, the Sheen portion of this, applies to her true damage on her Q. And that's what she's maxing first these days. So that means that the Sheen damage converts over to the true damage. I feel like it's not intended to do that, but they have never fixed that. So I don't know why that works with on-hit effects like Sheen, but it does. So that just means that she just smacks people for 1,000,000 damage when she gets Divine Sunder or so. And that applies to towers as well. He completely annihilates towers by doing, like 800 true damage to a tower whenever that Q procs. So that's really, I think, the biggest thing about her right now is her interaction with Sheen items, and the Q is just way, way too much true damage for a basic ability, right? We're talking it's doing more damage in a lot of circumstances than like a Cho'Gath ultimate, right? But this thing's on a much, much lower cooldown. It's like on a 6-second cooldown before ability haste once it's maxed out. So just way too much damage going on there. And on top of that, her kit's just so strong to begin with. She has great mobility with the E, so it's really hard to catch her out. She can overextend and, bully people under tower or threaten to split push and get away really easily with hookshot from a lot of situations. She can engage on people. She can gank really easily with hookshot. Just an extremely powerful ability that still does pretty respectable damage. They have nerfed the damage over time, but it's still really good. And I don't know why it still gives like 60% attack speed if you hit an ally. Like, it's good enough just with the mobility and the initial damage that it does. But anyways, it's just a really strong ability. The W is kind of whatever, but it does give her a little bit of extra trading in the laning phase. The Q we talked about, it's just an extreme amount of damage later on in the game. And then her ultimate is something I think that sets her apart from a lot of the other carry champions, like a Fiora, a Tryndamere, Riven, I guess to a lesser extent. But the fact that it's locked down CC starting at 2.5 seconds. So this is excellent for gank assist. So if the jungler comes up there and you're level 6, it's virtually guaranteed the person's going to die, right? Because you can get on them anytime you want with hookshot, and then you just press R, and even if they flash or dash or whatever, you're going to follow them, and you're going to lock them down for 2.5 seconds, and then the jungler's going to come in and kill them. So it's pretty much guaranteed kill every time this R is up against 90% of champions. So that's something that I think sets her apart, in that it just allows her to snowball so much, to just guarantee that gold whenever a gank comes in. And then, of course, if you can do it yourself, if you're really far ahead, no one can even lane against you anymore, because you can just force the all-in anytime you want. So there's very, very little counterplay to that unless you have some kind of knockback or, like, maybe Singed can flip her out of it or something. There are some, edge cases where you can play around it, but it's really, really hard to deal with her. So for all of these reasons, I just think she's incredibly powerful. And of course, she's going to get the suite of, items that give you survivability and a ton of damage. And she has all the mobility and the shield off of her passive and the gank assist. She's got an overloaded kit. So she's really mobile, difficult to kill, and just does a ton of damage and has utility on top of it. So I've been saying this for years. She just has one of the most dangerous kits in the top lane. Unless her numbers are just absolutely gutted, she's almost always going to be a really strong pick, especially for people who know how to play her. Okay, and then Shen is someone that I did have on the top 5 last time, but I edged him up just a little bit because I think he's going to get more value after the nerf to teleport, because now his ultimate is going to be a bit more unique. Right, he's going to be one person who can rotate down bottom, and other people can't follow him as easily now with the teleport. At least pre-14 minutes, it's going to be very difficult for them to position to follow him correctly. So really good global presence, and he's just a pretty good fighter overall. Like, he's good at dueling a bunch of other melee champs in the top lane. He has the utility from the taunt in team fights. He has the E, which can block a lot of auto attack damage. So he has pretty good base stats, himself. He can fight, but he also has that utility. Works really well with a lot of other hard engage comps. Hecarim's really strong right now. You drop him on a Hecarim, and Hecarim ults the back line. It's going to be really difficult for a lot of people to deal with that. So, really strong, just solid champion overall. He just got, like I said, a little bit better just because his ultimate gained more value because people can't follow it. And he scales incredibly well over the course of the game as well, I think. Actually he doesn't, so never mind. It seems like he should scale pretty well, but I guess he can get beaten up by the Fioras and the Camille's and stuff like that, maybe late game. So yeah, it kind of looks like he falls off a cliff late game, but he stays pretty strong for a lot of the game. Alright, and then we have Garen next. We have to go through these kind of fast, obviously, because there's 25 champions that I'm going to talk at least a little bit about, and I don't want this to be like a 2-hour video. Garen, I still think is going to be really good. Now, again, he's kind of like Shen. He's going to benefit a lot from teleport getting weaker because he really wants to take Ignite. Or I guess Ghost in this case. He doesn't want to take teleport because he's so powerful in the lane in a lot of matchups that if you get left alone, he can definitely solo people at level 6. So either having Ignite or Ghost. Ghost seems a little weird to me, but I guess that allows you to stick to people so they can't, flash away potentially. And then he's just going to go, Stride Breaker. Then you can kind of decide from there. You can go more damage with Mortal Reminder. If you want to split push, Dead Man's Plate can be pretty good. And then Sterix is pretty good if you intend a team fight. Yeah, the main thing that I like about Garen is, first of all, he's really easy to play. He's very forgiving, right? He has really high base stats. He has free regeneration in the laning phase. He has a big shield. He's just very tanky, so you can, be very aggressive with your trades. But then he also has a lot of movement speed. So he can split push. He's very difficult to gank because he can just run away. I believe his movement speed steroid also breaks slows. Yeah, removes slowing effects. So that makes him even more difficult to lock down because he can just Q, clear the slow, and then just run away. So very annoying to deal with. Does a ton of damage. Really good at snowballing his advantage in lane. In 5v5 team fights, his utility is not going to be as strong as some of the other champions. And he's not going to be able to probably 1v1 fight, a 3-item Camille. But in that early to mid game, you can just snowball so hard, get ahead, and then just start split pushing and applying a ton of pressure to the rest of the map, or rotate around into other lanes. So anyways, and he has a really high win rate, so that's useful as well, 53%. So I think that he's really good, particularly at like Platinum and lower, where people just, aren't going to know how to play around him. I think he's going to be pretty strong. And then Tahm Kench is another one. I think his win rate has fallen down a little bit over the past couple of patches, but again, he's going to be really strong in that lane kingdom, kind of meta, right? He's very good against a lot of other melee champions in the top lane. He has a lot of sustain. He has a lot of just stickiness about him, right? Between his Q and his ultimate and his W, he can make it very difficult for people to get away. So kind of like Camille, if you get ahead, it's going to be hard for them to walk up and get any CS because you can always threaten to kill him. So he does kind of fall off later on in the game, I believe. Yeah, he definitely falls off a cliff as the game excels. As you can see, for the first 20 minutes, he's incredibly strong in the laning phase. But then after that, his scaling is atrocious. He has almost no scaling with the items that he gets. He has good AP ratios, incidentally, but just nobody gets AP items on him. You're just really incentivized to go tank stuff. And his CC is somewhat limited compared to other people. So he is good in that one-on-one sense, but he's not going to have, the point-click, like Malphite Ultimate or something like, Cho'Gath with all of his AoE CC that he brings to team fights. Or like a Maokai or something like that. So he's just much more of a duelist, lane-dominant champion that does bring some decent utility later on. He can protect the backline with his R. He can gum up that front line and stun people and lock them up and just kind of be a pest that's difficult to kill. So I think overall, just the fact that he's really, really hard to kill and does bring some unique traits, and the fact that he can bully early on as a tank is pretty handy. But you got to make sure that you're trying to close out those games before late, because it can get pretty rough. And then Urgot is the last one that I'll mention. Urgot's he's been pretty good for a couple of patches, but I'm putting him up here. His win rate definitely went up a bit here, again, because of Lane Kingdom. He can take Ignite. He can force those fights early. He doesn't have to worry about people teleporting, away from him. And he does scale pretty well as far as his damage goes over time. Now, I don't know if his win rate is just kind of all over the place. It looks like over there, but in theory, he does scale better than some of the other champs because he's almost like an AD carry in the fact that he's ranged. The Titanic Hydra is going to proc off of each one of his little whatever bullets that he fires with his W. Now, I don't think you get the full value off of it, but you do get some value off of it. So he's just kind of my pick if you want to have a ranged bully champion top, but you still want kind of the tankiness and the utility of something like an Urgot. That's good. And also because you can take Ignite, and in some of these team fights, especially against squishy champions, that R can really net you a lot of kills if you're good at sniping people out with that R. You can really help out your jungler if they're getting into a fight, if it's a bunch of carry junglers or something like that. So overall, I just think he's pretty solid. But there are a lot of champs you can play in the top lane. If you're proficient on some of the carries, the Yones, the Yasuos, Rivens, Fioras, all that kind of stuff, you can win with them. But I think that these are the, 5 that I would pick to be some of the more consistent picks. Okay, because none of them are too mechanically challenging, right? Like Camille to some extent, but she's not Riven, she's not Yone, she's not Yasuo. If you just get some games in, a lot of it's the decision-making rather than the mechanics on her. Okay, and then in the jungle, Hecarim is kind of my new pick that's been rising up over the last couple of patches, and I've seen it firsthand a few games, just how strong this new build can be, and it does seem to be a little bit troll, and his pick rate has definitely gone up as well. But it's the Kim Tank, which is strong. That makes sense on him. But it's the Muramana that I was a little confused about. Sorry, it's this Siri thing. I think it just says it one more time. So with Muramana, you can charge it up in the jungle now because it does work. Strike any target. So it does work off of jungle camps now. I'm not sure how long that's been a thing, but it does work off of the jungle camps. But the main thing is that with Muramana, the shock applies the same ability that you use cannot apply shock to somebody within 6 seconds. But you can hit multiple targets with abilities and shock multiple people, and you can hit people with multiple different abilities to also apply shock, which is that on-hit damage. So the thing with Hecarim is that he has a lot of AoE abilities, right? He's got his ultimate, he has his Q that he can spam, his W does some damage. So he basically has 4 different abilities that can apply shock. So if you run in with your ult, and of course the auto attacks are going to apply it too. So, if you run in, you ult, 2 or 3 people, you're going to be applying shock to all of them, If you already have your W going off when you run in there, that's also going to apply shock to them. And then you do your Q AoE, and that's going to apply shock. So you can basically triple shock in an AoE when you go in on a team fight. And obviously, that's a lot of burst damage when all of that's stacked together. So I think that's why people are doing it, is because of just how well it works with all of his AoE abilities in team fights to just get a lot of value off of it. So that's my best guess as to why that happens. I was trying to see a video or like a guide or something, like why are people doing, like why is it happening right now compared to other builds, and I don't know, maybe it has been good for a while. Maybe it's just that other builds got nerfed, or certain champions that were really good against Hecarim have been falling out of favor a little bit. I'm not entirely sure what's up with that, but I know that he's pretty strong with this ability. He does a lot of damage, a lot more than you would think once he gets this stacked up. And then, of course, the Chem Tank has always been a good item on him. I will note that Chem Tank is not significantly better than the other options, right? So, like, Trinity Force, still going to be a good option on him. Ghostblade actually seems to be the highest win rate option. Now, I'm not entirely sold on this because some of his damage is magic, right? Like his ultimate and his W. But the lethality does apply to his Q, which I believe is physical damage, and of course his auto attacks. And you know, the main perk of this is that it has such a low cooldown for 45 seconds, and it just gives you a lot of out of combat movement speed. So that is a good item. You know, if you do want to snowball early, the win rate on that is strong. I'm not sure what you're supposed to get after that. The lethality would also work really well with Muramana, because the shock would do extra damage. However, you're really squishy with this, and that's one thing you have to keep in mind with Hecarim is his base stats are not the highest in the world. They're okay, but you will get blown up. If you go for something like Ghostblade and you don't completely one-shot people with that, they can turn around and kill you. So that's why I think a lot of people prefer to go something like Chem Tank, which has the resistances, or Divine Sunder, which is going to have, you know, resistances, healing, all that kind of stuff. Even Trinity Force is going to have that health on it. So it's up to you. You know, obviously you can kind of read the situation, but I do think that the Muramana is something that you can try out, and that's what a lot of people are doing. Although, you know, kind of like Chem Tank, Muramana as a second item is not a significantly higher win rate than Sterix or Dead Man's Plate, you know, or Death's Dance. All of these are going to be pretty good items on him. So that gives him the flexibility. If your team needs more damage or if your team needs more tank, he can kind of fill in and make that happen. He has pretty reasonable wave clear. And a big part of it, too, why I think he's going to be stronger on this patch is they, you know, nerf the hell out of shield bow. So most people are not going to be doing shield bow, which means those all-in, blow them up instantly type of champions that can get access to the backline are going to be a lot stronger. And Hecarim is one of the best at doing it out of the jungle. You know, obviously you have like your Vi's and stuff like that can do it too. I don't think Vi always took. I don't think she takes shield bow. She does take Sterix. But anyways, Hecarim really strong right now. Great ganks. ADCs are squishier than ever, so just get in there and delete them. It's going to be a good champion. Speaking of deleting people, Diana did get, nice segue there, Diana did get a significant buff on this patch. Now her win rate's not insane, but it is up like 2 or 3% from where it was, and her play rate is also incredibly high right now. She's actually the second most played champion. So that means that a lot of people playing her are not going to be that great on her, especially because a lot of people are probably playing her right now because a lot of the, you know, all caps videos and stuff are saying, oh my god, Diana, OP, OP, OP. And she probably is strong, but it's probably encouraging a lot of amateurs or people that don't have a lot of experience on her to play her. And so that's probably dragging down her win rate, is what I'm trying to say. So in the hands of someone who's actually experienced on Diana, the win rate is probably much, much higher right now. I don't know what her delta is. I guess it's not like super high, but they basically gave her much faster, I think, probably much faster wave clear off of her passive. And just being at, like, you can see right here, the pick rate, it just went from like 3% to 18%. And the win rate didn't skyrocket that high. But as you can see, in most ELO brackets, it's probably up at least a couple of percentage points. So I guess she's still just going to get like a standard, you know, rocket belt into Shadow Flame. There are several different things you can get on her. It looks like Nashor's First actually has a slightly higher win rate. As usual, Zhonya's is a bait item. You don't want to get that unless it's like third, second. You're just not going to have enough damage. But either getting Proto Belt or Nashers or Shadow Flame all look like they're pretty good second options. So if you want to play a champion that can hard carry and scale out of the jungle, that has much stronger wave clear, then I think Diana is going to be one of the better picks out of there. I would probably play her over something like Kha'Zix right now, unless you're just God mode Kha'Zix player. I just think that she's just going to be a little bit more consistent because she can just run in, just like facing someone, just go in and blow them up. Versus Kha'Zix has to worry a lot more about vision control, flanking, all that kind of stuff. Okay, Nunu's still going to be really strong. His win rate did inexplicably drop quite a bit on this patch. He was like 53 or 54% win rate, so I'm not entirely sure like what's going on there. Maybe he just has a bad matchup against some champs that, as you can see, his win rate just kind of trending down. Maybe he just has a bad matchup into some champs that are becoming popular out there, but he still does all the new things that I always talk about. Exceptionally good ganks early on, particularly for a tank. He's one of the best gankers in the game with that snowball, especially coming off his scuttle. It's so fast, and most champions just can't deal with it. So you have really good gank potential. His wave clear, or his jungle clear rather, is pretty good. It's not the best in the game, but it's all right. You're going to be healthy on the clear, so if you get invaded, you might have to give up a camp, but you're probably not going to die. And then his control, obviously, of objectives, your scuttles, barons, dragons, things like that are going to be really strong. He has really high base stats. He can get, some reasonable utility items if you need to do that later on in the game. So he's strong, and just his passive as well later on is going to buff up anyone that scales well off of attack speed, just off of his blood boil. So he just brings a lot to the table in terms of utility, survivability, objective control, tankiness. He's just kind of everything you want in just a role player jungler. Now he cannot get access to the backline very easily. Something like a Tahm Kench can just block him when he's rolling in on the front line. But if you just want to play front to back and just kind of disrupt and peel for your own backline, he's going to be one of the better top end options as far as like early ganks, objective control, and peeling late game. He's pretty good. Okay, and then we've got Vi. Still going to be a really strong champ. Ever since they cleaned up a lot of her interactions, gave her some quality of life buffs a couple of patches ago, she just skyrocketed up in win rate. Now, she has come down a couple of percentage points on this patch. So I'm not sure exactly what's up with that because I don't believe she ever got shield bow. That would be kind of goofy on her. It looks like some people might be going Eclipse, and that did get nerfed on her. So maybe that's part of it, is the people who are getting Eclipse are getting a lower win rate. But Divine Sunder and Trinity Force are still going to be really strong on her. Sterix still just makes it incredibly hard to kill you, especially with her passive shield. And she just has a really good, easy access to the backline. He can just ult those 80 carries. And especially since they don't have shield bow anymore, there's a much higher probability you're actually going to be able to blow them up while you have them CC'd. So that ultimately bodes well for her. So yeah, really strong, good role player champ. I think she takes dragons and barons reasonably fast as well because she does percentage damage off of her denting blows. It says it does a maximum of 300 damage against jungle monsters, but that's still pretty good. Especially, if you have a lot of attack speed and things like that off of Trinity Force. She's going to be pretty strong. So overall, good role player. Doesn't do a ton pre-6. Her ganks are a little suspicious before 6, but other than that, she's going to be really effective, I think, in the meta right now. And then we have Warwick as the last one that I'll mention. He has a really high win rate as well. It has dipped a bit. He was like in that 53 type of range, I think, before. But he scales really well off of Titanic Hydra, and then the buffs to Sunfire Aegis helped him out a lot as well, because his AoE wave clear has always been a bit suspicious. He just doesn't have any AoE abilities, right? His Q is pretty good against single target, but his W doesn't do anything in the jungle. His E doesn't do anything. So he basically just auto-attacks a lot. So it's hard for him to clear raptors and golems and stuff like that. So being able to get that Tiamat early and build it into an effective item like Titanic Hydra is good, and then also being able to get the Balmy Cinder for even better wave clear is nice. Now, one thing that's really good with him after they reworked Titanic is that it applies a lot of extra on-hit damage. Every time he swings with his ultimate, it's going to do that little splash to do a lot of extra on-hit damage. So that's why people have, been going Titanic over something like Blade of the Ruined King. Also because you have Tiamat, which is for the wave clear Titanic. He's pretty good. Once he gets ahead, he can definitely be on the strong side. Kind of like Nunu, depending on the enemy team comp, it might be hard for you to get on their back line because people can body block your ultimate. But he's going to be just a very effective pest. Has a pretty good chunk of CC between his ultimate, his E, and he has really good gank potential as well. Once he puts on that blood scent, especially once he has his R, you can definitely just run around the map and clean up people that are low. And in solo queue, a lot of people are going to be running around. They're going to be low, especially in the bot lane now that, shield bow, people are going to be getting that less. They're going to have less sustain in the laning phase, and there's a chance that they might end up getting a little bit lower and overstaying under tower than they used to. And that's where Warwick can come in and have those really good cleanups. So, and he's so good at that because his E also blocks tower shot damage. So you can, very comfortably, dive people under tower, use your ult. It's going to heal you while you're taking tower shots and killing them. And then you can just kind of walk out with your E and not take too much damage. So, yeah, really good diver, really good at cleaning up YOLO Q. I think Warwick's going to be on the strong side. Okay, mid lane. Now, this one does have a little bit more of a shakeup to it than the last one. And my first one is going to be Anivia. Now, she does have a really high win rate compared to a lot of other champs on the list right now. So she's got almost a 54%. There aren't that many that have higher than like a 2% pick rate that have that sort of win rate. And the big part of it is they've nerfed other items that she doesn't get, right? So they've nerfed Cosmic Drive. They nerfed Crown of the Shattered Queen. And she doesn't get those. And they also buffed Archangel's Staff. So now you're going to save money on that. It's still going to be a really strong item on her. Leandries is the same item it's been for quite a while now. That's still going to be on the strong side. And she just has really good wave clear. The W is having that terrain is really nice with a lot of interactions. She just completely shuts down Nunu. It's impossible to do anything. I've played the Nunu side of that matchup. It feels horrible. You can like block Scion ults. There's just like some really good utility that you can do with Crystallize. Especially if the enemy's rocking a lot of melee champs, which most people are playing melee in most roles outside of ADC and mid lane. There aren't a lot of ranged junglers that are super popular right now. There aren't a lot of ranged top laners that are super popular right now. And she just excels when there's tons of melee because, again, you can gum them up with your W. Your R is going to make it really difficult to try to, run through to kill people. And then, of course, your Q is going to have an easier time stunning people if they're all grouped up. So she just crushes melee comps. It's really hard to siege against her. She can protect some of those tower bounties really well if you get ahead. She's very good at contesting dragons and barons and things like that because of your zones of control. And she just scales incredibly well. Like, her damage is really, really high on this E. It's got like a 1.2 AP ratio with a 340 base, the 4-second cooldown if they're chilled. So really high scaling champion. She does not roam very well, but I don't think there's as much roaming in the meta right now, especially with the nerf to teleport. She's just going to be looking for more kill pressure probably with Ignite. So overall, I think just really good control mage, and the nerfs to Victor, the nerfs to some of these other items that some of the other control mages like to buy, particularly Cosmic Insight and Crown of the Shattered Queen, really has nudged her up a little bit. And speaking of Victor, I do think that Victor is still going to be on the strong side. Yes, some of his items have been nerfed, but that change they made to him 4 or 5 patches ago where he no longer has to spend real gold to upgrade and get his augments. Now he can just spend that, bonus currency that he gets off of his passive and save the gold so he can buy real items now instead of having to buy the augments. That just really made him a lot stronger. And also the fact that the meta has slowed down a little bit with a lot of bounties gives him a lot more gold, lets him stay in the game if he falls behind. So he's still going to be a really, really strong champion if you can protect him on the back line. He can kind of kite for himself, with the Siphon, with the W. He's just going to do a ton of damage in team fights if he goes unchecked, especially once he starts stacking up that gold. So as you can see, you know, his win rate's just kind of off to the races as the game goes on. So still going to be a really strong champ. A lot of people are still going the Crown of the Shattered Queen. It just feels nice against Assassins, I guess. However, I will note that Ludens does have a 2.5% higher win rate. So Ludens is probably a better pick if you think you can position well enough not to die, or if they don't have a lot of Assassins. That's going to be a pretty good option. And coincidentally, it also looks like Cosmic Drive is going to be a lot stronger than the standard Shadow Flame. Even after the nerfs, just having that extra movement speed, ability power, ability haste, so you can, you know, cast more death rays and stuff like that, is still going to be incredibly powerful. Lichbane is something that people do like to get. Maybe, I don't know when you would get this, like a Q Max or something like that. I'd probably just go Cosmic personally over Lichbane most of the time, but they do have a very similar win rate. I'm not a you know, an expert on Victor, but anyways, he's still going to be a really strong, good control mage option right now. Vex is another one who is still really good, particularly at higher levels of play, but especially if the enemy is playing a bunch of champions that like to dash, you know, and run around, and you're going to get a lot of value out of that passive, out of your fear. She's going to be really strong. And just those resets, especially off of something like a Hecarim who can dive the back line. She can also get on the back line and just really blow people up. And then once she kills one person, she can start rotating around. And, you know, everyone's seen her go off before. So I still think she's going to be a really strong champion, particularly with dive comps. Dive comps are going to be really popular right now with your Hecarims. And, you know, even, you know, stuff like Diana coming out of the jungle is going to want to dive the back line. Shen pairs really well with a lot of dive comps. Camille, in theory, can even dive in there if she's going to have enough people to follow her up. Kai'Sa's a popular ADC right now who can dive in there. Rakan's the most OP support. No, I mean, he is a good support. He's not incredibly popular right now, but he can dive. But most people are playing Enchantress for support. But anyways, I still do think that she fits in really well with a lot of the stuff that's going on in the meta right now. Nothing too fancy, nothing new going on there. It's still probably just going to be Everfrost, Shadow Flame. But she's going to be one of the best options if you want that, you know, just get in there and assassinate their backline. If they don't really have a lot of tanks, if they're not going to be able to stop you from doing that, then she's going to be really strong. Versus like Anivia and Victor are probably going to be better at, you know, front-to-back team fights. Although Vex is still really good at that if they have a lot of mobility champions, which, let's be real, almost every champion that's been released in the last 5 years has 20 different mobility options. So anyway, strong champion. And then Cassiopeia is another control mage that I think is really good at kind of front-to-back fights. And she's gone a little under the radar. I did talk about her last time. Her win rate's not incredible, but she is difficult to play. But she's a big beneficiary of being able to get Archangel's Staff. Looks like a lot of people are getting Liandry's, although I'm surprised Ludens is not more popular. And it is. Well, it's not more popular, but it has a much, much higher win rate. Now, it's a small sample size, but the reason that I'm saying that is she really, really wants the movement speed, right? Like, movement speed is incredibly powerful on Cassiopeia because she can't buy boots, but she has really high base movement speed that she gets per level. So getting the movement speed off of Ludens just seems like a really big deal. And Liandry's, I don't know, like, it does extra damage and that's cool, but you're already going to annihilate people. I don't know. I just personally think that the Ludens is good, and that's also going to help you out with your wave clear as well. So I would probably go Ludens. The magic penetration is obviously a really, really good stat on her because she has fairly high base damages on her E, just because she can spam it out so much. So she scales really well with Spell Pen. So, anyways, I still think she's good. She's a huge beneficiary, just like Anivia, of the Archangel's change. Sorry, I'm kind of glitching out there. There we go. And then third item, I would still probably go Cosmic Drive, even after the nerf. Again, the movement speed is just such a big deal on her. She just likes everything here. The movement speed, the health, the ability power. So she can have a hard time against things that outrange her and blow her up, but she does very well against a lot of melee champions, very similar to Anivia, because she can ground them with a W, make it really difficult to dive her. She, of course, has her ultimate to help stop divers, and if they don't deal with you, if they don't blow you up, then you do a lot of consistent damage for a backliner, like more than most ADCs. So you can completely shred Barons, shred Dragons, tear through the Tahm Kench, or whatever tank they're trying to put up on the front line. She's going to force people to get magic resist, and even if they do get it, you're still probably going to blow them up. So very, very strong champion. Does not roam very well, but again, I feel like roaming is, as a mid laner, is good, but it's not as strong as it has been in past metas. Maybe that'll change a little bit on this patch with the ADCs being weaker. They are easier targets right now, particularly when people can't, teleport down to help them. But I still think if you can become proficient on Cassiopeia, she's going to be really strong right now. And then Kassadin's another one that I bumped down a little bit here. He takes a really long time to come online. Yes, once he gets to 16, he is really strong. But they did nerf some of the interactions on him, right? They nerfed Archangels, or Crown of the Shattered Queen, I should say. They buffed Archangels, which is good. And honestly, I didn't think this was going to hurt Kassadin that much, but it has brought his win rate down a little bit. So he is still strong. It just takes him a little while to, come online, and, the meta is speeding up a little bit with, like, Hecarim and some of these other more aggressive early game junglers. Diana, who's going to want to, look for kills at level 6. So I don't know the precise reason why he's fallen off a little bit, but he clearly has, if you look at the pick rate and the win rate. But that's just kind of my guess, is that the meta is speeding up a little bit despite some of the bounties. I know they said they did nerf the bounties a little bit, but despite some of the bounties, getting people back into the game, people are playing faster champions, and he's just not going to do as well in that environment. But he's still going to be good enough to make the top 5. And then ADCs, man, it is rough. 4 ADCs right now. Almost all of them have just really bad win rates. If you look at the mid laners, almost all of the mid laners, the PBI, I guess if we look at the picks, okay, a lot of the popular mid laners do have kind of lower win rates as well. But I don't know. It just feels like ADCs in particular just have it really rough. There just aren't a lot of standouts. Right? I mean, there aren't a ton that are, like, horrible. Most of them are in, like, that 49 to 51% win rate range, but it just feels hard. And anecdotally, it just feels like a lot of ADCs, unless you get really fed early, this is always the case. It's so hard to get back in the game, especially because people just sit on your lane so often. It's going to happen much more now that the top laner can't teleport down. The jungler's just going to come sit on that lane, and it's hard to farm. Like, it's hard to get ahead, even if you don't die. Like, it's just, if they decide to do that, then it can be really, really challenging to get into the game. Right, so my top one is going to be Jhin, just because I think he handles that type of situation better than almost anyone. He has pretty high base damages built into his kit. He has really good wave clear with his W. He has excellent gank assist, or good wave clear with his Q, I should say. Really good gank assist with his W, so if your jungler does show up, or if you do have an all-in champion on your team, like a Leona or a Nautilus, which are increasingly rare, or Thresh, to see those. Most people are playing Enchanters now. But you can follow up with that. The traps do help a little bit in terms of, kind of controlling bushes, kind of, maybe helping out a little bit if people are trying to gank you. They aren't amazing, but they're okay. They do give you a little bit of extra protection. And then, of course, the ultimate, if you're really proficient at hitting that, can secure you a lot of kills. You can help out, in the jungle from long range. You can rotate up half the river and help out from there. So it is very skill intensive, but it does do a ton of damage if you land all of your shots. So, he's high skill cap champion, but very high rewards. And then he just does so much upfront burst damage that he fits in really well with a lot of these other high damage champions that are coming into the game. Especially now that, I don't know why the camera keeps doing that, but especially now that, Shield Bow is off the table, it's going to be a lot easier for you to Gale Force in and just, blow someone up with your 4th shot. So that's going to allow you to snowball a little bit more. So tons of upfront damage. If people are moving away from the turbo tanks, then he's going to be a pretty good option, right? So if you're seeing more, Hecarims with Muramana, and you're seeing, more Camille's and things like that, versus, or instead of like Nunu's or Malphite's or things like that, he's going to have a much better time in that type of meta. He can get a defensive boot, which is good. That's going to help you out against those Hecarim dives. I mean, Hecarim's still going to put in a lot of work potentially against you, but that'll help out a little bit. And then you do have that great movement speed as well off your 4th shot to potentially be able to reposition and maybe kite out the Hecarim long enough for help to arrive. So just overall, versatile champ, lots of upfront burst damage. Doesn't play particularly well with stuff like Sona or Soraka or whatever. He would much rather have a kill lane, but I mean, he can work with them. It's fine. A lot of people aren't getting Ardent Censer anyways outside of Lulu, so you're not losing that much opportunity cost by having the enchanters. Most of the time, they're just going to go, Moonstone into some kind of utility item anyways. So really good champ, does pair together with a lot of stuff out there, and he can still kind of do it himself, even if other champs aren't helping you out as much. Okay, and then after that, I think it is definitely a step down from many of the other ADCs. I think Jhin still functions and he's still okay, but Vayne kind of fell off a cliff, and you'll notice that Vayne isn't even on the list anymore. I just went ahead and took her off. Like, they nerfed Shield Bow so hard and Wits End so hard, and I mean, she is good in skirmisher style, so like you can still make her work, but it was really those 2 items that were pushing her over the top, and she did lose 3%. So you can still win on her, but I don't know. She really doesn't do anything if she doesn't have a lot of gold, right? So it's like, at least Jhin has some utility, right? He's got the traps, he's got his W, he has his ultimate. But Vayne really doesn't do anything if she can't auto-attack, and she does almost no upfront damage. You have to stay alive and constantly auto-attack. She is probably pretty good at playing around Hecarim, at least as good as an ADC could be. Because you can like go invisible when he charges and like maybe be able to knock him back with your Condemn, but either way, she's pretty good, but I know she's going to be conspicuously absent on this list, even though she was the number 1, most OP ADC last patch. She's still alright, but I think some of these other options are just going to be a little bit better. So Kai'Sa's one that has become, more popular, and her win rate is not phenomenal right now, but I do think if you play her well, this AP Kai'Sa is good, especially if your team needs like a hybrid or another AP type of option. It has, obviously, it really picked up in terms of win rate, went up a ton, like 2 percentage points last patch, and then the pick rate went up a lot. And a lot of it just has to do with her itemization is very unique and just kind of weird, but yet strong. So the fact that you start off with a Muramana, so your first couple levels are horrible. So, it's kind of like Vayne. But Nashor's Tooth, second item, that's where you really start to come online and get pretty strong. Oh, you got Blanky. Okay. Thank you.
Good night, Daddy.
Okay, hold on. Oh, you want a hug? Good night kiss? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to put the pajamas on tonight, or do you want to sleep?
But anyway, so I think that puts her in a pretty unique place, and I don't know if I don't think you max W with this build. No, you max it second, so you're still maxing Q. But that W, man, it just really hits like a truck. So that turns her into almost like a pretty strong poke champion, because whenever you hit him, it applies a 3 stacks of plasma and reduces the cooldown by 77%. So you can just chuck this out like every 2 seconds or something late game, and it's going to do a lot of damage, especially if they hit a couple in a row and you're able to proc your passive off of that as well. It can do a lot of damage. So now she's this weird like hybrid champion that does a decent amount of AP damage, still does some AD damage because her missiles are still going to be AD, and she's got poke with her W, she has dive potential with her R. So if you do hit someone with your W, chunk them by 50%, then you can dash in with your R, missile them, auto attack to trigger the passive, and they're going to blow up. So it's just kind of a really weird setup with her, and the fact that she can also go Crown of the Shattered Queen late game It just makes it really hard to blow her up too, because you're going to have that safeguard protection. You've also got your shield off of your ultimate. So just a really weird champ, but I guess that's fun. I mean, it's cool to have, weird builds that are new and exciting. So I think that's good. And the fact that, the other shield bow users got nerfed is going to help her out for the same reasons I keep talking about over and over again. She is an all-in champion. She does work really well with dive comps, and when they don't have a huge 700 shield, or they're less likely to have it, then she's going to thrive in that type of environment. So you have to survive the early game. She's horrible in the early game, but if you do manage to survive, pick up a couple of kills, then once she gets the Nashers, then it's really off to the races, and that's when she starts to become a real champion. So a bit slower, well, a lot slower than Jhin, but really interesting builds and opportunities, and sort of a unique way to fit into different team comps, I think, with Kai'Sa. Hopefully they don't nerf that build too much. It is really annoying when you're getting those W's spammed on you, but I think it's cool to have unique tactical options in different roles, and she's definitely unique right now with that build. Okay, and then Jinx, not a lot has changed here. She didn't want to get shield bow most of the time, so she indirectly benefits from other shield bow champions getting nerfed. Kraken, obviously going to be really good on her. She attacks very fast with her Gatling gun. And I believe Kraken also applies to towers, and she takes towers incredibly fast because of that Gatling gun, so it's really good. Now, a lot of people are getting either Phantom Dancer or Rapid Fire Cannon. If you're going to do any sort of team fights, please get Hurricane, okay? Hurricane, I guess it has a slightly lower win rate than Phantom Dancer, but it's so strong in AoE situations because each one of your rockets or each one of your Hurricane bolts is gonna turn into a rocket, and it just does massive splash AoE damage. So especially if they have a lot of melee champs and they're wanting to group up and team fight you, that's gonna be really, really strong. Now, Phantom Dancer, the power of this is you get the extra movement speeds. That does allow you to reposition and maintain your uptime on your auto attacks. So that is really good if you think you're going to have to, kite backwards and deal with a bunch of divers. It is going to be a good option. So if you do have the Hecarim on the enemy team or something like that, I can definitely see the value in Phantom Dancer. I think Rapid Fire is the least... I don't know, people buy it a lot, but I think it's the least powerful, and statistically it looks like it. Yes, you do get that long range hit. Yes, your rockets plus rapid fire is a very long range first shot, but it's just not going to be incredibly high burst unless you have full build, right? It's not like a Jhin fourth shot, and you're giving up everything else, right? You're either giving up the movement speed off of Phantom Dancer, or you're giving up the team fight power of Runins, and I just don't think that's a good place to be overall. So I know a lot of people like the safety from Rapid Fire, but I would probably choose one of the other ones. And just to clarify, I don't remember if they nerfed Lord Doms or what, but it is far, far weaker in a lot of situations than Infinity Edge, right? It's 8% weaker than Infinity Edge, so do not get Doms on her, okay? Make sure that... And it's also weaker than the Zeal items. So make sure, at least third item, make sure you're getting that Infinity Edge. Now, Dom's is pretty good, fourth item, but, I'd probably rather go for a GA at that point, which does have a much higher win rate as well. So Dom's is kind of a trap item on her. And then Twitch, still going to be pretty good, and we do need to finish this up. I don't want it to go over an hour for sure. Not a lot has changed, but very similar to Kai'Sa. He does have the option of going AP. Now, I'm not sure what the win rate differential is, but I have seen Twitches succeed with the AP. It does look like that build is falling out of favor by quite a lot. It's 4% lower. Now, once you get the death cap, though, it's on par with some of the other ones, but I don't know. Anecdotally, I can tell you that the AP does a lot in the very early game, so that's why I'm a little surprised that off of just one item, Kraken is that much stronger, but you probably do want to go with the crits with Twitch. I think, didn't they give him extra damage on his R at some point? That probably has something to do with it, 10 extra base damage whenever he uses his R. They also gave him longer range, I think, on Hurricane. Or they did something that basically buffed Hurricane, where I think the Hurricane matches his 800 range now versus it had only gone out to his minimum ranges before. So before Hurricane had only gone... 550 range. even though your main shot was like 800 range with your ult, their Hurricane bolts only reach 550. I'm pretty sure they all reach 800 now. It was like a quality of life change they made to Hurricane that made it a lot stronger. That also applies to Jinx too, by the way, to some extent. But anyways, so I would probably just go for the Hurricane build, just Kraken, Hurricane, Infinity Edge. Again, Infinity Edge is vastly superior to Lord Dom's. But yeah, he's just really good. As I've talked about for years with Twitch, he just has a kit built for solo queue with that cloaking, especially at like gold and lower, platinum and lower. People just aren't going to respect that invisibility. You're going to be able to roll up, gank junglers, gank mid lane, gank your own lane. People will overstay for tower plates, and then you can roll up and get free kills on them. So the cloaking itself is incredibly strong, and then if you go unchecked in team fights, if you're just patient, you just wait a second, wait for people to use their CC, and then you just show up with your ultimate ticking, you can just completely delete a team fight. So I've seen so many games where Twitch just hard carry wins those late game team fights, and he's just so incredibly difficult to deal with, because it's like, are you just gonna like not use your abilities and just wait? I'm thinking like as a Rakan just sitting here, it's like, okay, we have somebody caught. Am I going to use my ult and try to deal with that, or do I hold it for Twitch? Right? And inevitably, if I use it not on Twitch, then Twitch opens up as soon as I, use my W on somebody else and just deletes everybody. So he just puts a lot of pressure on the enemy team. They have to play, intelligently and preserve cooldowns for him, not be out of position, and obviously those are things that are difficult for a lot of people to do in solo queue. So anyways, I think he's a good solo queue warrior. And then Cassiopeia, I already talked about her. Now I'm putting her in the bot lane as a potential carry as well, just because so many of these other champs, they just take so long to come online right now. There aren't that many that are like good early game champs, and I have played Cassio in the bot lane in the past. Now, that was when she was like at one of her strongest states, but I still think she's going to be incredibly powerful right now. She does want levels for the passive movement speed, or the movement speed off of her passive, and also because her Twin Fangs level up her E as she levels. So she does kind of want those solo lane levels, but at the same time, she is also somewhat vulnerable to ganks, especially pre-6. So having someone in the bot lane to help you out, to help you with that farm, can potentially be pretty good. And she does combo really well together with a lot of, other champs in the bot lane that want to engage. If Leona goes in, she can drop the W there. She can ultimate, to follow up. So I don't know. That's kind of my spicy pick for bot lane. I think that people should consider running the Cassiopeia bot again. I know that Ziggs bot was popular for a while, and I always like Cassio a lot more than Ziggs. Ziggs obviously takes towers really well, and he does spike at level 6 with his bomb, at least before kind of all the nerfs to him, but Cassio just serves that ADC role a lot better, I feel like, because she has really high sustained damage. She takes Barons, she takes Dragons incredibly well, she shreds through tanks, and that's stuff that Ziggs just doesn't do. It's like he takes towers, but he doesn't do much damage to Barons or Dragons. He doesn't do much damage to tanks. And I think that's a big part of why he fell out of the meta overall. So, anyways, try out Cassiopeia. I think she could be good. You can try out other ADCs. I mean, they're all, like, balanced to some extent right now. Like I said, it's like 49 to 51%. So a lot of stuff definitely can work right now, but there aren't too many standouts after some of the recent nerfs. And then finally, I won't spend a lot of time on this. Be sure to check out my support tier list. I'll have it linked at the end of this video, and I linked it at the beginning. If you want more in-depth, I go over like 20 supports or so, I think, in that video. But I still think that Sona is going to be really strong. I have had one extra day of playing. It hasn't changed my opinion on a lot of stuff. Looks like her win rate is really like back up to where it was. Just about. I guess she was at 55.5, so I guess it is down about 1.5%, but it's up a little bit from where it was yesterday, I think, when I did the support tier list. But yeah, she's still going to be really strong right now, and people ask all the time, well, if I have Sona ranked so highly, why don't I play her more on stream? And I think that the main strength of Sona is her consistency, right? So if you're someone who is playing in just the normal ELO bracket that you've been in, I guess, for a long time, then she's going to outperform just on the raw strength, because you don't have to make decisions really with her. You're just kind of standing around using your abilities. Like, you don't have to really roam with her that much. You don't have to, coordinate engages that much with her. There aren't a lot of skill shots that you have to land with her. Just your ultimate and everything else is just press buttons. So she's incredibly straightforward to play. We'll say, and that's why she has a high win rate. It's just her base stats are so high, and it's really hard to mess her up. You just can't mess her up. Like, in ways that you can't mess up any support. I will say there's nothing unique you can mess up on her, right? You can still mess up by, being out of position, when you're trying to ward, like pushing up too far in lane and getting caught and killed. So yeah, your standard squishy support stuff, sure, she can die to mistakes that you make. But like I said, the no skill shots hardly, no tricky mechanics you have to play around. It's just straight up, don't die, press your keys, and you probably win team fights. And that's what makes her really strong. So the reason I don't play her as much is I feel like I don't have... So that's a strength, that you don't have to make decisions, but the weakness is also you can't make decisions most of the time, in that you can't pull the trigger and get those really good engages if your team is behind, to pick someone off and punish someone who's out of position. So you just can't punish people as much. You can't make plays, and I think if you're from a higher elo bracket, or you're aspiring to, maybe move to a higher elo bracket, you might be better served by trying to play an engaged champ. Although, I don't know, you can get it done with Sona, but you're just a little bit more at the whim of your team. You could make the argument that engaged champions also are at the whim of their team. If they don't follow up your engage, then it's worthless, right? So you could argue in circles all day about the merits of engaged champions versus the scaling of enchanters, but I personally don't play her as much because I've tried to play her, but I always just feel like I'm just basically watching the game. Like, I just don't have as much agency over the game. And at least because at my peak I was from a higher elo bracket, I feel like I have the potential to get back there if I just make better decisions and punish people with these engages more. So use that knowledge that I have, from the higher elo bracket, just play better and punish people off of the engages. I think that's for me, like, why I don't play her a lot. But she is incredibly effective. She does have a really high win rate, and like I said, if you just don't want to be bothered by making those engaged decisions, or you just want that consistency without the skill shots, you can focus more on the mini map or focus on shot calling and stuff like that. There's a lot of merits to playing her. Okay. Or if you're a bit older, like me, and I know that a lot of people on the channel probably are, a little bit of an older crowd, which is fine. Just the fact that she doesn't have those mechanics are a huge perk, right? If your reaction time's slowing down a little bit, or you just kind of get, confused by everything that's going on the screen. I know that happens to me occasionally. There's like a million different abilities going off, and I'll be like, what is going on right now? Sometimes. And she's very good at that, right? She allows you to focus on other stuff other than her mechanics. So she definitely has, some merits to her. The last couple, and then like I said, I definitely want to keep it under an hour. I think Soraka is still pretty good. Some people have stopped going Grievous Wounds as much just because Gore Drinker's not as popular as it once was. So you are forcing people to go a little bit more out of their way if they want to get Grievous Wounds. It's not as free as it used to be. But she still is heavily affected by that. So Grievous is still going to hurt her. Yes, I know the ultimate does cleanse it away, and that is nice. They put that back in there. But a lot of people are just going to reapply it right after the ultimate, right? Because there's no cooldown on Roanonomicon or whatever. So it's typically going to get reapplied pretty quickly after the ult. But she's still really strong. It's just kind of like Sona. I feel like you're watching the game a lot more. Soraka does have a bit more agency in my mind because you can affect all of the lanes. If you are watching the minimap really well, you can affect the other lanes with the ultimate to turn those fights around. So I think that she does have that going for her. But otherwise, I still kind of feel like a spectator in the games when I play Soraka. But again, all the same stuff applies. I think that she can be really strong in the right situations. Rakan, just watch the stream. I talk about him a million different times. Really strong champion, great engage, pretty reasonable scaling, good itemization choices for the meta right now. Or just watch the tier list video that I linked. I talk about him for probably like 10 minutes in that. Nami, still going to be really strong, has a lot of kill threat in the laning phase, reasonable scaling later on, so I feel like you do have a bit more agency. You can make a few more plays with her than some of the other enchanters, particularly in the early game. So that's something that I like about her, but she is going to get outscaled by the Sona and the Soraka if you don't make those plays early. And then Lulu still scales incredibly well, but the fact that a lot of the shield bow users and those attack speed users like Vayne and some of the other ones have fallen off in the meta does take a little bit of value out of her, particularly because I think Jin's the best ADC. But anyways, that's going to be it. Have a good day. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.